David had always believed that small acts of kindness mattered. It wasn't that he expected anything in return, but somehow, helping people made him feel like he was doing something right in a world that often felt unfair. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, and most days he felt invisible, just another face in the crowd. Yet when he held a door open for someone, helped a neighbor carry a heavy box, or simply smiled at a stranger, he felt alive in a way money or status never gave him. He lived in a small apartment above a corner grocery store where he worked part-time. His life was simple, almost too simple, but he found comfort in the little things. The smell of fresh bread in the mornings, the laughter of children outside his building, and even the quiet rhythm of his routine offered him a sense of stability. Still, life wasn't always kind to David. Some mornings, he woke up with a tight feeling in his chest, thinking about bills he could barely pay and rent that always seemed a little too high. One Thursday evening, the sky had turned a deep gray and the rain was falling steadily. David had just finished his shift at the grocery store and he was tired, his legs aching from standing for hours. He didn't mind hard work, but today the weight of exhaustion felt heavier than usual. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and stepped outside, expecting nothing more than a quiet walk home. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman bent over with age, struggling to carry 2 heavy bags of groceries. The rain was soaking her coat and she looked frustrated, almost ready to give up. David didn't hesitate. He ran over, feeling a mix of concern and determination. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "Do you want me to help you with those?" The woman looked up at him, surprise and relief in her eyes. "Oh, would you, dear? I don't know how I'll get these to my car. My back isn't what it used to be." David smiled and lifted one of the bags carefully, making sure not to spill anything. "No problem at all. I'll take these to your car for you." As they walked together, he noticed her shivering slightly. He offered his umbrella and she gratefully accepted. They moved slowly, but David didn't mind. Each step felt purposeful, as if this small action meant more than he could yet see. She told him about her day, her voice soft but animated, sharing memories of her grandchildren and the garden she tended every morning. David listened quietly, happy to hear her stories even though he barely knew her. When they reached her car, she looked at him with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, young man. It's rare to meet someone so kind these days. You've made my day a lot brighter." David shrugged lightly, feeling a warmth spread through him. "It's nothing. I'm happy to help." She handed him a small envelope. "Please take this." "Just a little something for your kindness." David hesitated. He didn't usually accept tips or gifts from strangers, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. "All right," he said, taking it. Inside was a $5 bill and a note that simply read, "Kindness always comes back to you." He smiled and waved as she drove away, the rain blurring her image through the window. That night, David walked home slowly, reflecting on the moment. It was just a small act, he told himself, but it had made him feel lighter. Somehow he felt more connected to the world around him, like the invisible threads of human connection had tightened just a little. The next day was harder. His shift started early, and the grocery store was already busy when he arrived. People rushed in and out, carts clattering, voices overlapping. David did his best to keep a cheerful attitude, greeting each customer with a smile, bagging groceries quickly and efficiently, but the exhaustion of yesterday's long hours was catching up with him. He noticed small things more than usual: a child crying because he dropped his ice cream, a man trying to reach a high shelf and failing, a woman arguing on the phone. Each situation tugged at something inside him. He stepped in wherever he could, helping the boy clean up, reaching the item for the man and offering a kind word to the woman before she stormed off. By the time his shift ended, David's feet were sore and his back ached. He felt drained, but also a strange sense of satisfaction. Even though he hadn't been paid extra for any of it, each little act of help seemed to matter. And yet, as he walked to the bus stop in the drizzle, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of frustration. His own life felt stuck. Bills were still piling up. The landlord had already mentioned the rent again, and the idea of getting ahead seemed almost impossible. He thought about giving up on his little gestures, focusing only on himself, but the memory of the old woman's smile stopped him. There was something powerful about kindness, he realized. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about being human, about showing up for someone when they needed it most. And sometimes, he thought, that small act could ripple outward in ways he couldn't even imagine. The following week, things didn't improve financially. He received fewer hours at work. and a notice arrived in his mailbox about a late payment on his electricity bill. David's frustration mounted. He felt invisible, struggling to keep his head above water while the world seemed to move on without noticing him. Yet even in those moments, he found ways to help. One afternoon, a young boy ran past the store chasing a soccer ball that had bounced onto the road. David instinctively ran after it, grabbing the ball just before it rolled into traffic. The boy's mother came running, panic in her eyes, but quickly turned into relief when she saw her son was safe. "Thank you so much," she said, breathless. "You have no idea how much this means to me," David smiled, shaking his head. "It's okay. Just glad he's all right." Small moments like that filled his days. They didn't fix his bills or change his job, but they reminded him that he mattered in ways money couldn't measure. People's gratitude, their relief, their smiles, it was like fuel that kept him going when everything else felt heavy. One rainy evening, as David walked home again, he saw someone struggling outside a coffee shop. A young woman had dropped her laptop, papers scattered everywhere. Rain was soaking the documents, and she looked utterly frustrated. Without thinking, David rushed over and helped her gather everything. "Here, let me help," he said, handing her papers carefully. She looked at him with wide eyes, surprised at his sudden offer. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." David shrugged lightly, smiling. "No problem. Happens to the best of us." She packed up her laptop and bags, still smiling. "You're a good person," she said softly before hurrying into the shop. David stood there for a moment, rain dripping from his hair, feeling the same warmth he always felt after helping someone. It didn't solve his problems, but it reminded him that he had control over small choices. Small moments that could change someone's day, even in the middle of life's chaos. As he finally reached his apartment, David paused at the top of the stairs, looking out at the city lights blurred by rain. Life was hard, he admitted, and it didn't seem fair sometimes. But the memory of the smiles, the words of thanks, the small gratitude he received, it gave him hope. Hope that even the smallest acts mattered, that being kind could ripple further than he could see. That night, as he lay in bed, David thought about the old woman, the little boy, the young woman in the rain. He realized that all these moments were connected by one simple thread: his choice to care, even when life was tough. Maybe, he thought, that choice would lead to something bigger, something he couldn't yet imagine. For now, he just needed to keep moving forward, keep helping when he could, and trust that good things might come in ways he hadn't yet seen. The next morning, David woke early, ready for another long day at the store. His feet ached and his eyes were heavy, but he carried the same quiet determination he always did. Life wasn't easy, and he knew there would be struggles ahead. But he also knew that every time he chose kindness, he was shaping a path for himself, even if he didn't understand how. And as he stepped out into the bustling streets, umbrella in hand, David felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet sense of purpose, a belief that small acts could make a difference and that perhaps, in some way, life had a way of rewarding people who stayed true to their hearts. David had thought the week would be quiet, just another series of long shifts and short breaks. Life had a rhythm, predictable and sometimes frustrating, but it was the life he knew. He woke early that morning, the sky still gray from the night's rain, and set out for work. The streets were slick with puddles and the air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and exhaust. Even in the dreary morning, David found small comforts, like the soft crunch of his shoes on the sidewalk and the sound of birds singing somewhere hidden in the city. As he walked past the coffee shop near his apartment, he noticed something lying near the curb. It was a small leather wallet, worn but well cared for. David picked it up carefully, checking inside for identification. His hands trembled slightly as he discovered a large amount of cash, more than he had ever seen in one place. Alongside it was an ID card. The wallet belonged to a businessman whose name David recognized from the news, someone prominent in the community, known for owning several companies and making investments that affected hundreds of people. David's heart raced. He thought about his own struggles, the rent due at the end of the week, the groceries he hadn't been able to buy, yet the bills that seemed to multiply no matter how hard he tried to pay them off. For a brief moment, he considered keeping the money. It would solve so many immediate problems, offer a temporary relief from the constant stress that weighed on him. But just as quickly, he shook his head. That wasn't who he was. He had learned from experience that taking shortcuts, even tempting ones, often brought more trouble than good. Besides, the wallet wasn't his. Someone else was relying on it, someone who would be anxious and worried without it. He knew the right thing to do. David spent the next hour trying to locate the man's office. He walked through busy streets asking for directions and occasionally checking the address on the ID. Each step made him more nervous. What would the businessman think? Would he be angry? Would he be suspicious? David kept reminding himself to breathe, to stay calm, and to do the right thing. Finally, he arrived at the office building, a tall glass structure reflecting the city around it. The receptionist looked at him curiously as he explained the situation. "I found this wallet outside near a coffee shop," David said, handing it over carefully. "I wanted to make sure it got back to the right person." The receptionist smiled, calling the businessman's office. Within minutes, a man in a tailored suit appeared, his expression shifting from surprise to relief as he saw the wallet. "You found this?" he asked, taking it from David. "Yes, sir," David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I saw it outside and thought it was best to return it right away." The businessman, whose name was Mr. Thompson, looked at David with a mix of surprise and curiosity. You didn't take anything?" David shook his head. "No, sir. It's not mine. I figured you might need it back." Mr. Thompson studied him for a long moment. There was something in David's eyes, honesty, humility, maybe a quiet strength, that made him pause. "It's rare," he said finally, "to meet someone who does the right thing just because it's right, not for reward." David felt a small flush of pride, though he tried to remain modest. "I just wanted to make sure you got it back," he said simply. They exchanged a few more polite words before David left the building, wallet delivered, conscience clear. As he walked back onto the street, he felt a strange mixture of relief and nervous excitement. Nothing had changed yet, nothing had shifted in his life in a big way. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had begun. The rest of the week went by in a blur of work and routine. David still faced the same challenges, reduced hours, mounting bills, and the quiet anxiety of not knowing how he would make ends meet. Yet he carried a subtle lightness with him, a small spark ignited by the encounter with Mr. Thompson. There was something in the businessman's words that stayed with him. It wasn't praise or reward, but recognition, an acknowledgement that David's choices mattered, that his actions had weight. One afternoon, as David stocked shelves in the grocery store, he overheard customers talking about a charity event being organized by one of the city's prominent businessmen. It was Mr. Thompson, the same man whose wallet he had returned. David's curiosity piqued, but he didn't think much of it at the time. He had his own life to worry about, his own responsibilities pressing in from every side. Still, the coincidence lingered in his mind, like a quiet whisper of possibility. The following Saturday, David decided to stop by the coffee shop near where he had found the wallet. He needed a brief break from the monotony of his week, and the warmth of the cafe and the smell of coffee felt comforting. As he waited for his drink, he noticed a man sitting alone at a table, reviewing papers with a focused expression. There was something familiar about the posture, the presence, and then he realized it was Mr. Thompson. David's stomach tightened. Should he approach him? Would it be awkward? He took a deep breath and walked over, unsure of how to begin. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I hope you don't mind, but I think I returned your wallet a few weeks ago." Mr. Thompson looked up and his face brightened with recognition. "Ah, yes. You're the young man who found it outside. Please have a seat." David hesitated, then sat across from him. They talked at first about simple things, the weather, the coffee shop, small anecdotes. David felt his nerves ease as Mr. Thompson smiled, genuinely interested in what he had to say. Slowly, the conversation shifted, moving from small talk to deeper topics. David found himself talking about his work, the challenges he faced, the difficulty of making ends meet while trying to live honestly. Mr. Thompson listened intently, nodding occasionally, asking questions with genuine curiosity. He seemed to be paying attention not just to the words but to David himself, the way he spoke, the care he took in explaining his struggles, and the quiet resilience in his tone. David had never had someone in a position of power listen to him like this. Most people assumed he was invisible, another face in the crowd, someone to be overlooked. But Mr. Thompson didn't overlook him. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. David realized he had shared more about his life than he normally would with a stranger. Yet there was a comfort in being heard, in having someone genuinely interested in his perspective. When the conversation ended, Mr. Thompson shook his hand warmly. "You have a remarkable way of looking at the world," he said. "Honest, kind, and observant. These are qualities that are rare, and I hope you never lose them." David walked out of the coffee shop that day with a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, hope, and a little disbelief. He wasn't used to receiving compliments from strangers, let alone from someone with so much influence and power. He wondered if perhaps fate had a strange way of rewarding integrity, or at least noticing it in subtle, quiet ways. The next week, David returned to his routine, still working long hours, still dealing with financial strain, but carrying a renewed sense of purpose. He began to notice small opportunities around him, ways he could help at work, moments to support his neighbors, even simple gestures for friends and strangers. Each act felt like it mattered more than before, as if the universe had whispered that integrity and kindness were not wasted efforts. One evening, as he was walking home, he saw a man struggling with a heavy box outside a small business. Without hesitation, David ran over to help, lifting the box carefully and carrying it to the man's car. The man thanked him repeatedly, surprised at the young man's strength and willingness to help. David smiled, shrugging. "It's nothing," he said, but deep down he felt that each action, no matter how small, had a weight, a significance that could ripple far beyond the moment itself. By the end of the week, David's life hadn't changed in obvious ways. He still had the same apartment, the same part-time job, the same bills to worry about. But something subtle had shifted within him. He felt more confident, more capable of facing life's challenges, and more aware of the power of simple acts of honesty and kindness. He understood now that life's opportunities often came in ways one could not predict, and sometimes the smallest gestures could open doors that had once seemed locked forever. That night, as he lay in bed, David reflected on the past few weeks: the wallet, the coffee shop, the conversations with Mr. Thompson. He realized that choices mattered, not just for him, but for the world around him. Each act of care, each decision to do the right thing was a thread in a larger tapestry he could not yet see. And though his path was uncertain, David felt a quiet optimism. Perhaps one day those threads would lead him to something unexpected, something far greater than he had ever imagined. For now, he promised himself, he would keep moving forward, keep helping where he could, and trust that life had a way of noticing those who chose integrity over convenience, kindness over indifference. Weeks had passed since David had returned the wallet to Mr. Thompson. Life for David had settled into its usual rhythm, filled with work at the grocery store, small errands, and evenings that felt both quiet and endless. Yet even amid the routine, he couldn't shake the memory of the man in the coffee shop, the way he had listened so genuinely, and the way he had treated David not as just another person passing through life, but as someone whose thoughts and choices mattered. David often wondered about fate. Sometimes he felt that small acts like returning a lost wallet or helping someone with groceries could carry weight far beyond what the eye could see. It was hard to explain even to himself, but he felt a subtle shift within him, a sense that life had a way of noticing, of rewarding in ways that weren't obvious at first. One Saturday morning, David decided to take a walk through the city park before his shift. The air was crisp, and the leaves had begun to show hints of autumn colors, yellow and orange blending with the remaining green. He loved this time of year, when the air was cool but not harsh, when the city felt quiet in contrast to its usual chaos. As he walked along the path, he noticed a community event being set up near the park's central pavilion. Tents were being raised, tables set with pamphlets, and a small crowd was gathering. Curious, David approached, trying to see what was happening. A volunteer handed him a flyer. It read that a local businessman was hosting a charity event to support community programs for underprivileged children. David's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the name immediately: Mr. Thompson. He remembered the wallet, the coffee shop, and the way Mr. Thompson had looked at him that day. And now here was an opportunity, not just to see the man again, but to witness him in action, making a difference in ways that David could only dream of contributing to. David wandered around, quietly observing. Children ran around the pavilion, Volunteers carried boxes of supplies and families spoke excitedly about the upcoming activities. David found himself drawn to the energy, the focus, and the genuine smiles on people's faces. He realized that moments like this, where people worked together for a greater good, reminded him why he believed in small acts of kindness. As he approached a table, someone called his name. He turned to see a familiar face. It was Mr. Thompson. The man's eyes lit up when he saw David, and he gestured for him to come closer. "I'm glad you're here," he said warmly. "I've been meaning to talk to you." David felt a mixture of surprise and nervousness. "I didn't know this event was happening," he admitted. "I just came by to see what was going on." Mr. Thompson smiled. "Well, it's a good thing you did. I wanted to introduce you to some of the programs we're supporting, and I think your perspective could be very valuable." David blinked, unsure of what to say. He hadn't expected an invitation, not really. But there was something in the tone of Mr. Thompson's voice that made him feel welcomed. Not judged, not patronized, but genuinely considered. They walked together through the pavilion, Mr. Thompson explaining the various programs, after-school tutoring, mentorship initiatives, and resources for families in need. David listened intently, nodding at points and asking questions when he could. He realized that these were the kinds of opportunities he had always wanted to be part of, but had never thought possible for someone like him, with no connections or experience in such circles. As the morning progressed, Mr. Thompson introduced David to a few volunteers and coordinators. Everyone treated him with respect, taking his ideas seriously. David was struck by how approachable and grounded Mr. Thompson was, despite his success and influence. There was no arrogance, no sense of distance, just a genuine desire to make a difference. At one point, Mr. Thompson pulled David aside. "I've noticed something about you," he said quietly. "It's rare to meet someone with your integrity and perspective. You don't just talk about helping others, you actually do it every day. That's a quality I admire." David felt a mix of pride and humility. He had never thought much about recognition, but hearing it from someone like Mr. Thompson was different. "I just try to do what I can," he replied softly. Mr. Thompson nodded. "That's exactly why it matters. People like you can make a real impact. Have you ever considered applying your energy to projects like this? Not just helping one person at a time, but making a difference on a larger scale?" David hesitated. I don't know. I've never had the chance. I wouldn't even know where to start." "That's okay," Mr. Thompson said reassuringly. "Sometimes the first step is just showing up and learning. The rest comes naturally, and I think you could bring a perspective that others in this world don't often hear." The conversation lingered in David's mind long after the event ended. He went home that evening feeling both excited and anxious. The idea of stepping into a world so different from his own was daunting yet thrilling. He thought about the small acts that had led him here, the wallet, the grocery bags, the little gestures that he had taken for granted. Each choice, each act of kindness had shaped this path in ways he could not have predicted. The next week at the store, David couldn't stop thinking about the event. He began noticing opportunities to help more actively, not just at work but in his community. He assisted a neighbor with carrying groceries, helped a child retrieve a lost toy, and even spent an extra few minutes chatting with an elderly customer who seemed lonely. It was exhausting at times, but he felt a sense of purpose growing inside him, a belief that small actions could lead to something larger. One afternoon, he received an unexpected call from Mr. Thompson's office. David's heart raced as he listened. The man on the other end spoke warmly, inviting him to the company's headquarters for a casual meeting to discuss community initiatives. David's mind raced with questions and excitement. He had never been in such an environment before, never met people in positions of power and influence. Yet there was a quiet confidence growing within him, fueled by his previous encounters and the realization that honesty, empathy, and persistence mattered. The day of the meeting arrived, and David dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were simple but neat. He walked into the towering building, heart pounding, and was greeted by the receptionist, who showed him to a small meeting room. Mr. Thompson entered shortly after, smiling warmly. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, gesturing for David to sit. They began by discussing the charity programs, the challenges faced by underprivileged communities, and the ideas Mr. Thompson had for expansion. David listened first, taking notes, absorbing the conversation, and then cautiously began to share his own thoughts. He suggested small initiatives, like mentoring programs in local schools, community workshops, and ways to make the programs more accessible to those who needed them most. Mr. Thompson listened carefully, nodding at each suggestion. "These are excellent ideas," he said sincerely. "You have a way of seeing things clearly, and your perspective is refreshing. I think we could really use someone like you to help shape these initiatives." David felt a wave of disbelief mixed with excitement. He had never imagined that his honesty and small acts of kindness could lead to an opportunity like this. It was more than a job. It was a chance to make a tangible impact, to use his experiences and empathy in a meaningful way. Over the following weeks, David began working part-time with Mr. Thompson's team. He attended planning sessions, helped organize events, and even met some of the families and children who benefited from the programs. Each day brought new challenges, but also a growing sense of fulfillment. For the first time, David felt that his actions, his choices, and even his character mattered in a bigger picture. He also noticed changes in himself. He was more confident, more willing to speak up, and more aware of the influence of simple actions. Helping someone carry groceries or returning a lost wallet were no longer isolated gestures. They were part of a larger philosophy of integrity and kindness that now guided his life. One afternoon, after a successful community event, Mr. Thompson pulled David aside. "You've done remarkable work in such a short time," he said. "I want you to consider taking on a more permanent role. Your perspective, your honesty, your ability to connect with people. It's rare, and it's exactly what we need." David was stunned. He had never imagined that a chance encounter, a simple act of returning a wallet, could lead to such an opportunity. He realized that life had a way of rewarding those who stayed true to themselves, who chose kindness and integrity even when it seemed unnoticed. As he walked home that evening, David reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Each small act, each choice to help, each moment of honesty and courage had built a path he had never seen coming. He understood now that opportunities often arrived quietly, unexpectedly, and that they were often the result of the values and actions he carried every day. David felt a sense of calm optimism. The future was still uncertain, but he knew that as long as he remained honest, kind, and persistent, life would continue to open doors in ways he could not yet imagine. And for the first time, he truly believed that small acts of goodness could ripple outward, connecting him to people, opportunities, and experiences far beyond what he had ever dreamed. David had never imagined that his life could change in such unexpected ways. The part-time work with Mr. Thompson's team had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never considered. Every day brought new challenges, but also a growing sense of purpose. For the first time, he felt that the small choices he had made, returning a lost wallet, helping strangers, simply being honest, were part of a larger story. One bright morning, David received a call from Mr. Thompson's office. The tone of the voice on the other end was warm and professional, inviting him to a more formal meeting at the company headquarters. David felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew that this could be a turning point, yet he also worried about whether he was ready for something so significant. Still, he reminded himself that he had always taken one step at a time, and that approach had brought him here. When David arrived at the headquarters, he was struck by the size and elegance of the building. It was a stark contrast to the modest grocery store where he worked, and for a moment he felt out of place. But he remembered Mr. Thompson's words. Integrity, honesty, and empathy mattered more than appearance or status. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, trying to steady his nerves. The receptionist greeted him with a smile and directed him to a conference room. Soon Mr. Thompson entered, his expression welcoming. "I'm glad you could make it, David," he said warmly. "I wanted to talk to you about taking a more active role in our community programs." David listened carefully as Mr. Thompson outlined the vision for the company's new initiatives. The programs were designed to help underprivileged families, provide educational opportunities for children, and create support networks for people in need. David was fascinated. These were areas he had only dreamed of impacting, yet now he had a chance to contribute in a meaningful way. "I want you to help shape these programs," Mr. Thompson continued. "Your perspective is unique. You understand what people struggle with, and you approach challenges with honesty and empathy. That's exactly what we need. David felt a mixture of pride, disbelief, and gratitude. He thought about his past, the small acts that had seemed insignificant, the groceries he carried for the elderly woman, the lost wallet he returned, and how they had somehow led him to this moment. It was a reminder that integrity and kindness often created ripples that could extend far beyond what one could see. Over the following weeks, David dove into his new responsibilities with energy and dedication. He attended planning meetings, collaborated with team members, and began organizing small community events. Every project was an opportunity to connect with people, listen to their stories, and find ways to make a real difference. David quickly realized that leadership wasn't just about giving instructions. It was about understanding, empathy, and the ability to bring people together toward a common goal. One day, he visited a local school where the company had set up a mentorship program. The children were shy at first, unsure of what to expect from someone like David. But as he spoke to them, listened to their concerns, and shared small stories of his own experiences, their hesitation faded. By the end of the day, the children were laughing, asking questions, and eagerly participating in activities. David felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had helped more than a single person this time. He had made an impact on a whole group, shaping their day and perhaps even their outlook on life. The work was challenging. There were obstacles at every turn. Limited budgets, logistical issues, and sometimes resistance from people who doubted the value of the programs. But David faced each challenge with patience and determination, remembering that change often took time. He learned to listen more than he spoke, to ask questions, and to involve others in decision-making. Each step forward felt like a small victory, and even setbacks were opportunities to learn. One afternoon, after a particularly successful community event, Mr. Thompson called David into his office. "You've done remarkable work," he said sincerely. "I've been watching your dedication, the way you connect with people, and the integrity you bring to every task. I think it's time to offer you a permanent position." David was stunned. He had never imagined that a series of small, everyday choices could lead to a job that offered stability, responsibility, and the chance to truly make a difference. His mind flashed back to all the little moments: the rainy evening with the elderly woman, the wallet on the sidewalk, the conversations at the coffee shop. Each act had built upon the last, creating a path he had never expected. I don't know what to say," David replied, his voice filled with emotion. "This is more than I could have ever imagined." Mr. Thompson smiled. "You earned it. Your honesty, kindness, and perspective are rare. You've shown that doing the right thing consistently, even when it's difficult, leads to opportunities. I want you to continue building programs that make a real impact. We need someone who understands the people we serve, someone who cares as much as you do." David accepted the offer, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. He realized that life had a way of noticing the choices people made, that integrity and empathy could open doors that talent alone sometimes could not. This was a turning point, not just in his career but in his life. As the weeks turned into months, David became more confident in his role. He organized workshops, coordinated mentorship programs, and even developed new initiatives aimed at helping struggling families find resources and support. He worked closely with school administrators, community leaders, and volunteers, learning the value of collaboration and the importance of listening to others' perspectives. David's days were long, and the work was demanding, but he found joy in it. He saw the tangible impact of his efforts: the children who smiled during workshops, the families who expressed gratitude for support they had never imagined, the volunteers inspired by his dedication. Each interaction reinforced his belief that even small acts of care could create ripples that spread far beyond a single moment. Outside of work, David remained grounded. He still visited the grocery store where he had once worked, still helped neighbors when he could, and still took time to notice the small struggles of everyday people. He understood now that true impact came not just from titles or positions, but from the consistency of one's actions and the sincerity behind them. One evening, after a long day coordinating a community event, David walked home through the quiet streets. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here: the lost wallet, the grocery bags, the chance meetings, and conversations that had seemed inconsequential at the time. Each act of kindness, each decision to do what was right, had shaped a path he could never have planned. David realized that life didn't always reward effort immediately. Sometimes it waited, quietly observing until the right moment arrived. And when it did, the rewards were not just about material success, they were about connection, purpose, and the ability to make a difference in ways that mattered. That night, as he lay in bed, David felt a deep sense of peace. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but he understood now that he had the tools to face it with integrity, empathy, and determination. He had learned that small acts of kindness, honesty, and courage were never wasted. They built bridges, created opportunities, and connected people in ways that could transform lives. David closed his eyes, thinking about the journey ahead. He knew there would be challenges, but he felt ready. The path was not always easy, but it was meaningful. And for the first time, he truly believed that the choices he made each day could lead to outcomes far beyond what he could imagine. In that quiet moment, David understood that the simple act of caring, of choosing integrity over convenience, had the power to change not only his life but the lives of countless others, and that realization filled him with hope, purpose, and the quiet confidence that the best was yet to come. David's life had changed in ways he could have never imagined. The journey from long hours at a grocery store to playing an important role in community programs had been both unexpected and extraordinary. Yet even as he settled into his new responsibilities, he never forgot the small acts that had brought him to this point: the wallet he had returned, the groceries he had carried for a stranger, and the tiny gestures of kindness he had offered along the way. Each had been a step leading him here. Despite the success and recognition he was beginning to experience, David remained humble. He still remembered the days when his rent was overdue, when he counted every dollar, and when life felt like a constant struggle. Those memories grounded him, reminding him that empathy and honesty were not just values to live by. They were tools that allowed him to connect with others and make a genuine impact. One afternoon, David was asked to attend a high-level meeting at Mr. Thompson's office. The company was planning to expand its outreach programs, and they wanted him to provide insight from his perspective on the ground, the person who had seen the community firsthand. David prepared carefully, thinking about the families he had met, the children he had mentored, and the volunteers who had worked tirelessly alongside him. He wanted his input to be meaningful, practical, and rooted in real experience. When the meeting began, David shared his observations clearly and confidently. He spoke about the challenges families faced, the importance of consistent support, and ways to make programs accessible to those who needed them most. The executives listened intently, and Mr. Thompson nodded frequently, occasionally adding points that reflected David's ideas. "You've given us a perspective that we sometimes miss at higher levels," Mr. Thompson said. "Your insight is invaluable. I think it's clear that your experience and judgment can help us shape programs that really make a difference." David felt a quiet pride. He had worked hard, but more importantly, he had stayed true to his values. Every decision to be honest, to act kindly, and to help others had led him to this moment. It was a reminder that doing the right thing, even when it seemed small or insignificant, often led to unexpected opportunities. As weeks turned into months, David's influence within the company grew. He was trusted with more responsibility, coordinating larger events and overseeing new community initiatives. Each day was filled with challenges, but also with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. He discovered that leadership was not about being the loudest or most powerful person in the room. It was about listening, caring, and making decisions that benefited not only the organization but the people it served. Despite the demands of his work, David maintained his personal approach to life. He still made time for the small gestures that had defined him, helping a neighbor, sharing a kind word with someone struggling, and noticing the little struggles that often went unseen. These actions reminded him of his roots and kept him grounded, even as he navigated a world of influence and opportunity. One rainy evening, as David walked home from a long day at the office, he noticed an elderly man struggling with an umbrella that had turned inside out. Without hesitation, David ran over to help, holding the umbrella steady and assisting the man to a nearby bus stop. The man smiled, grateful and relieved. "Thank you, young man," he said. "It's rare to see someone stop and help these days." David smiled back, feeling a familiar warmth. "It's nothing," he said. But inside, he knew that every act of kindness, no matter how small, had value. It was these moments that connected him to the world and reminded him why he had chosen to act with integrity all those years ago. As the months passed, David's role continued to expand. Mr. Thompson often consulted him for new projects, valuing his practical knowledge and his ability to connect with people on a human level. The programs David helped manage were making a real difference. Children were learning, families were receiving support, and the community was slowly but surely improving. David's influence was felt far beyond the office walls, touching lives in ways he had never imagined possible. One day, Mr. Thompson called David into his office. There was a serious tone in his voice, but also a warmth that made David feel at ease. "David," he began, "I want to offer you a permanent executive position within the company. I've seen your dedication, your integrity, and your ability to inspire others. You've proven that leadership comes from character, not just title. I want you to take on a role where you can make an even greater impact." David was speechless. He had never dreamed that the simple choices he made, returning a wallet, carrying groceries, being honest in small moments, could lead to this level of trust and responsibility. He thought about the years of struggle, the long shifts at the grocery store, and the quiet nights when he wondered if he was making any difference at all. And now all of those moments had culminated in this opportunity. I don't know what to say," David finally replied, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you. I'll do my best, I promise," Mr. Thompson smiled. "I know you will. You've shown that being genuine, kind, and thoughtful can lead to real change. This position isn't just about work, it's about the people we serve, and I know you'll continue to make a difference." As David walked home that evening, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Each small act, each moment of honesty, and each decision to help someone else had built a path he could never have planned. Life had a way of noticing those who acted with integrity, rewarding persistence and kindness in ways that were often unexpected but profoundly impactful. He thought about the old woman whose groceries he had carried, the lost wallet he had returned, and the conversations with Mr. Thompson that had followed. Every interaction had shaped his journey, reminding him that no act of kindness was ever wasted. Even when life felt unfair and challenges seemed overwhelming, choosing to act with empathy and honesty had created ripples that led to opportunities beyond what he could imagine. David also reflected on how much he had grown. He was more confident, more empathetic, and more aware of the influence of his actions. He had learned that leadership was about more than strategy or skill. It was about understanding people, listening to their needs, and acting in ways that made a meaningful difference. The lessons he had learned in the small, everyday moments of his life were now shaping the way he led, inspired, and connected with others. Even as his life had transformed, David remained humble. He understood that success was not only measured by position or recognition, but by the impact one had on the world and the lives touched along the way. He continued to value the small moments, the smile of a child, the relief of someone struggling, the gratitude of a neighbor, because they reminded him of what mattered most. One evening, while walking through the quiet streets of the city, David saw a young man struggling to fix his bike. Without hesitation, he went over to help, offering guidance and lending a hand until the bike was working again. The young man thanked him profusely, surprised by the kindness of a stranger. David smiled, feeling the same warmth he had always felt in moments like this. "No problem," he said. "Happy to help." That night, as he lay in bed, David thought about his journey, from the grocery store to the wallet on the sidewalk, to working alongside Mr. Thompson and shaping programs that made a real difference. He realized that life often unfolded in ways that were unpredictable, yet deeply rewarding when one acted with integrity and kindness. Every small choice, every decision to do the right thing, had built the foundation for the life he now led. David felt a sense of peace and purpose. The future was still full of uncertainties, but he knew that as long as he stayed true to his values, acted with empathy, and remained committed to helping others, opportunities and fulfillment would continue to follow. He had learned that success was not simply about wealth or status. It was about living a life that mattered, touching the lives of others and staying honest and kind, no matter the circumstances. He thought about the people he had met along the way, the children who laughed during workshops, the families who expressed gratitude for support, and the volunteers who worked tirelessly alongside him. Each person had contributed to his journey, and he understood that true success was measured in connection, compassion, and the ability to make a positive difference. David closed his eyes, reflecting on the path he had walked. He understood now that life's rewards were often hidden in moments that seemed ordinary or insignificant at the time. A simple act of kindness, a choice to do the right thing, or a gesture of honesty could ripple outward, creating opportunities and connections far beyond what one could imagine. And as he drifted into sleep, David felt a quiet confidence that the best was yet to come. He had learned that integrity, kindness, and empathy were not only values to live by, they were forces that shaped his journey, connected him to others, and ultimately transformed his life in ways he could never have expected. David's story was proof that simple acts, when guided by genuine care and honesty, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. He had discovered that life often rewards those who act with compassion, that opportunities could appear in the most unexpected ways, and that staying true to one's principles could open doors to a future far greater than imagined. In the end, David knew one thing for certain: the small choices we make every day, helping a stranger, returning what is lost, offering kindness without expectation, could change not only our own lives but the lives of countless others. And that understanding, more than anything else, filled him with hope, purpose, and the quiet certainty that every act of goodness mattered.